name's Marty. Welcome to this video series on building your own LPH style guitar kit from Guitar Kit World. So in the following video, I'm going to show you how I put together this particular guitar. We're going to cover all aspects of the build, including finishing, installing hardware, connecting the electronics, and then doing a final setup at the end. Now, if you've never built a kit guitar yourself before or don't have a lot of tools, don't worry, I'm not particularly handy myself, but just about anyone can put together a guitar like this using basic tools and just a little bit of patience. Okay, so the guitar we're working on today is an LP style guitar. It's a semi-hollow body. We have a mahogany body and neck, a flame maple veneer top, rosewood fretboard, and trapezoid abalone inlays. Now, being an LP style guitar, we also have a neck and bridge humbucker, three-way selector switch, 2 volume and 2 tone controls, and of course a tune-o-matic bridge. Okay, so from here I'm going to take the video back to the start of the build, and we're going to start by putting the guitar up on the bench and inspecting the body for any marks or scratches. Okay, there's no real issues to address with this body. I can't see any marks or dents or glue stains or anything of that nature. The mahogany body itself, we may need to do some grain filling, but as I said, it has had a sanding sealer applied, and that may suffice. Okay, otherwise, got our humbuckers. Got 2 of these, a neck and a bridge humbucker. Our tuners, bridge and tailpiece, and our electrical components and hardware. So pickup selector, wiring and pots for volume and tone and volume knobs, input jack, guitar strings, truss rod cover, and a selection of nuts and bolts that we'll need to put the guitar together. Okay, so our first job really from here, now that we've inspected the body, is to dry fit the neck. So what I like to do is just lay the guitar on top of the polystyrofoam. When we insert the neck, be careful not to just push it straight down. We want to insert one in like this first and bring it down so that we're not chipping the edges of the neck pocket. Just check the skull length. The skull length should be 628mm, which looks exactly right. Okay, so now we've got some glue on our neck heel and inside the neck pocket. The next thing to do is clamp the neck to the body. So we don't need to protect the top of the guitar here, but I do have a small section of timber just underneath the body protecting the underside of the guitar. I'm going to use 2 clamps here, and that will distribute the pressure from the clamps evenly. The other thing, don't be too concerned. Obviously we're trying to minimize any issues, but don't be too concerned if some glue escapes once you're tightening those clamps. We'll be inspecting the body next and cleaning and removing any glue stains from the binding and the veneer top. If we look on the side here, we can certainly see some glue marks. This is probably due to the binding being glued in place and some of that glue's gotten on the body. So first we'll try to remove that with some warm water and a rag. Failing that, we may need to do some sanding. Just trying to rub around some of those more visible areas where we can see some glue. Okay, so I've just let the guitar body dry. The warm water's actually removed some of the marks on the top here, but as we can see if we look on the side, it's been pretty ineffective removing those glue stains or glue marks around here. So what I'll do next is some light sanding. So I'm using a 240 grit sandpaper. So you can see the sandpaper's been fairly effective removing those stains around the side of the body. The glue can sometimes be a little hard to spot on the body of the guitars. So if you're not sure, spray a little bit of moisture on the body, the same way you would if you were raising the grain of the timber. And if any water's not being absorbed, it may be a sign there's some issues with glue still. So you can see I'm now sanding the veneer. Just keep in mind they're really quite thin, so you want to avoid sand throughs. And lastly, I've just got some degreaser on a rag, and I'm giving the guitar a good wipe over. Okay, so next I'm just masking off the body. I'm just using some material from the packaging to put inside those F-holes just to prevent any stain dripping down onto the inside of the body of the guitar. And then I'm masking off the neck pickup cavity and the bridge pickup cavity. Then I'll mask off the fretboard. You may be wondering why I'm wearing gloves.
It's a particularly hot day here. My hands are fairly sweaty, so I'm just trying to prevent any oils from my hands going on the body of the guitar itself after we've cleaned it off.
Okay, so the plan with this guitar is to give it a nice purple stain on top and a natural finish around the sides and the neck. But just look at this grain here. It could do with a little more emphasis. So what I'm thinking of doing is applying a black first, really rubbing that in, and then sanding it away. As per usual, just take a very clean rag. I've got Japanese brown here. Really work it in as well, because we'll be removing the bulk of this when we sand. As you can see, I haven't bothered masking the binding on the body of the guitar itself. I find that's a little more time consuming and not really worth the effort. You'll often find that the stain itself will leach under the tape, so it's often easier just to scrape the binding at the end. There's certain ways to do that, which I'll show you.
So just a quick clarification, you will want to inspect the binding carefully first. If you notice any cracks in the binding, you certainly will want to mask that up, as it will absorb stain.
Okay, so we've just let this darker stain dry. What I'm going to do now is start removing as much as I can using some 240 grit sandpaper. The objective here is to just leave some of that darker stain to absorb into some of those grain lines, and that will accentuate the grain when we then put our purple stain over the top. Okay, so we've sanded most of that darker stain off now, just left the sections we want, which is really going to help really make that grain pop once we put some purple on. So what I'm doing now is just going to apply a light sort of wash coat of purple. Probably follow this up with a stronger coat. Obviously in between sanding and restaining, I've taken a lot of time to really clean the guitar up and remove any dust. So we've let our first light coat dry. I'm going to follow that up now with a stronger coat. I've just mixed this purple up a little bit stronger, so we'll see how this looks. And as you can see, where we did the first coat with the Japan brown, the grain's really starting to pop now. With a nice oil finish on top, this should look really good. I think that's just about right. So what we'll do now is let that dry overnight, and we'll come back and we'll look at grain fill the body and looking at a finish for the sides and the neck.
So once completed staining, I've waited for that to dry, and then I've flipped the guitar over and I've applied 2 coats of grain fill to the back, sides and back of the neck. Now we use a grain fill because this is a very open grain timber, being mahogany, and if we want a level surface to work with, we need to fill the pores, those open pores on the surface of the timber. You can use a water-based product or an oil-based. Typically oil will penetrate further, but water is a little tidier to work with, obviously, a little easier to clean up. And when you're applying grain fill, work with the grain first and then work against the grain. Apply it with a rag and really force it into the grain. So from here, I'm just sanding away that grain filler now. I'm sanding down to the surface of the timber, but obviously not below that. We don't want to dig into the timber and create new pores. I've started with 180, then 240, and finished with 320 grit paper.
Okay, so our next step is to start scraping the binding and removing some of the residue of the finish. If you've got a scuffle blade like this, just use a file or something like that. Grab it and lean it about 10 degrees and just drag it through or push it through. What this does is create a nice burr on the far edge, and when we drag that across the binding, it does a much cleaner job of removing the residue. Now the idea is to line it with the edge of the guitar like so, and just very carefully start scraping off the binding. It's a job that requires a little bit of patience. It certainly will take you a little while. What I've found is it does a very tidy job. As you can start to see that white line really starting to pop out now. Okay, so I've got the guitar back on the bench now. As you can see, I've scraped all the binding and we've got that nice white contrasting line around the body of the guitar. I've sanded everything down to 600 grit and given everything a good clean off, brushed it and then wiped it with a damp rag. So next we'll be ready to apply an oil finish. Okay, so we'll start oiling the body. I'm just using a tung oil, which you can generally get at most hardware stores, places like that, and just start rubbing it in. So we're just applying our second coat now. What I'd like to do now is just do one final coat of buffing oil on top. Once you've got good coverage, just let that sit for about 15 minutes and then come away and wipe any excess, just while it's still tacky. So what you're doing is just wiping away the oil that hasn't absorbed into the timber. Okay, so the body's now dry. I'm just going to go through and oil up the back of the neck. Next, I've given it a sanding down with some steel wool. Now, steel wool, I just apply in a circular motion like this. What it will do is it tends to remove a lot of the shine from the finish. Don't worry too much about that, because the next step we'll be doing a polish with some car polish and buff or buffing compound of some sort, and it tends to bring that shine right back. The last step, generally when it comes to finishing guitars with an oil finish, is just using some basic automotive polish, rubbing that into the timber. This is just the way to remove any remaining scratch marks left over from any of your abrasives. Gives it a nice polished look. Really work it in. And then using a second clean rag, start removing. Starting to shine up a little bit already. I'll probably go over this a couple of times, so I'll stop the camera now. Just finished the final polish. As you can see, there's a lot